Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. As mentioned, our special guest, Christine Alisa. Christine is the author of the book, Turning the Hourglass, Children's Passage Through Traumas and Past Lives. Christine, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. It's great to be here.
And actually, it's interesting, your background. You became a child advocate as an elementary school teacher, and this is something that you expanded on, but your love of children and trying to help young kids really goes back to those days.
Yes, it does. I always, as a teacher, wanted to, like most teachers do, have an influence over kids. And I found that I needed to kind of move in a different direction where I felt I could make more of an impact.
What
So then
was
I
it?
moved to therapy.
Yeah, what was it you saw in some of the youngsters you were dealing with that you felt really wasn't being treated the way you thought it should be?
Well, I had kids in my class that had attention deficit disorder and they were on medication. And even sometimes the medication wasn't helping them. They were getting a lot of special help, but I could tell there were what I call an emotional piece. In other words, there were some issues going on with them that weren't being addressed. And when I would sit down and talk to them individually, sometimes they would tell me some really difficult things that had been happening in their lives. So I just kept hearing pain and problems. And as a teacher, that's not really my job, just to be there for them and teach them. But I decided, okay, I want to go into counseling where I can see if I can really do some profound healing with children.
You say in the book, Turning the Hourglass. By the way, Christine's website is healingthroughalternativetherapy.com. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and get all the information on the book. You say our Western society is not meeting the psychological needs of our youth, but rather programming them to believe that they will never be truly whole. That's pretty strong. And when you think about, and actually as you read the book, especially the introduction to the book, where we're really quick to label, we're really quick to medicate. Is that where we get into problems?
Yes, absolutely. I think we just think it's a kind of a fix all, and we start over-diagnosing these children. I mean, children are naturally, wanting to move around and play and be exuberant and do things, and
Yes.
and we've just now made them like, okay, well, let's just calm you down, keep you in a kind of a box, and it's keeping children from really expanding some of their who they truly are. Being ADD can not be a bad thing. It could be that they're very artistic and they can't sit in a classroom. That is not their first choice. In fact, there's a chapter in my book about a girl who was very artistic and she was ADD. She was a dancer. She could not sit still in the classroom, but it had nothing to do with her, her abilities or intellectual abilities, though she did have some past life issues that we had to work on because she had difficulty reading and staying focused. And the sessions that I did with her in past lives were able to bring her into a place where she could just be a little more still. ADD is a huge topic, and children are various cases. But in this case, she was able to really stay focused in the classroom, be able to read, and through doing some emotional work, which is part of the past life therapy work I do.
You talk about you sort of witness backpacks of pain dropping off the shoulders of the children. It lightens the load, and you can see a change. And in some cases, it's a rather quick and it's a dramatic change as well.
Oh, yeah. If I could tell you a story about one of the little children that I saw who dropped off his backpacks. He was only 2.5, and there was nothing wrong with him physically or organically or anything, but his parents brought him in because he still was not walking or talking or even crawling, and there was nothing developmentally wrong with him. But he had had a very traumatic birth. It was an emergency C-section, and he almost died. So what I did is I worked with the parents in the therapy session, and we went through that birth with all of us. And he went from being depressed, wouldn't talk to you, grumpy, to laughing, smiling, really trying to climb, or excuse, yeah, climb on things. And he was, crawling. And it was really miraculous because he was able to slough off all that trauma of his birth.
The book is called Turning the Hourglass: Children's Passage Through Traumas and Past Lives. Christine Alisa is our guest on the program today. And the book is fascinating because it's from the perspective, told through the perspective of the child, and you walk us through. You do therapist notes as you go through this. I want to go back to the title because people are probably listening, going, "Children's Passage Through Traumas." Okay, we can understand the trauma and past lives. When you talk about past lives to parents as you're working on the therapy with them, what is the reaction? Do they feel this is radical, or do they feel like you may be onto something here?
Well, when I see parents, I usually see them first. I interview them, and I am not trying to convince anybody of a belief system. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. I go with what the parents can understand. In other words, I don't push anything on them. I might even not say past lives. I might say, well, why don't we see this as a metaphor? If they really don't believe in this, which is totally understandable, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. But if you take the word metaphor and you say, okay, if there was something that was like what feels like goes on with this child, like an internal world, like a symbol of what might be what the child is going through. Can I explore that metaphor like a story? And if it is so that, the behavior changes, the anxiety leaves, the depression leaves, then can we just say, let's just do it and not worry about what it is? I do have parents who do believe in past lives, and so that's not an issue for them.
Right.
So they understand it. But I always work with parents. I try to be extremely sensitive to everybody's belief system because that's not what this is about. It's just what I have found that has worked with children. It's like any kind of therapy that works. Wouldn't you want to do it rather than not?
Right.
You know. Okay.
Christine Alisa is our guest on the program, and in the field of regression therapy is a pioneer. And as you read through the book and the children's stories, you see where it's actually working. And you say something that's very honest in there. Even as a therapist, it's not always clear what children are telling you. How difficult is that to try to listen and maybe try to interpret, decipher what it is they're telling you?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that when you're really being with the child, you are listening and sensing and feeling so much going on with them. And it's the job of the therapist to just be there. And if they say something that doesn't make any sense or you don't understand it, what I usually do is I make a note of it and then I go back to it because not everything children say makes sense.
Right.
But if they say it again and again in other sessions, then I have to go around and find the key that's in there. Like I had a girl that came to me and she was about 5, and all she wanted to do was come in and draw and paint pictures. And I couldn't get her to hardly say anything about it. I'd say, well, what are these pictures? Adults kind of want to analyze things and really kind of make sense of what the kid is doing. And that's not always possible. But as the sessions emerged, she was able to start telling me she painted red and black. And I said, well, what's the red? And she said, that's blood. And then the black, she said, that's my mom. And when she was ready, one day, it kind of gives me chills. She told her grandmother, she says, I need to see Chris Alisa right now. So she walked in the session, painted her red and black, and told me the story um, about a woman got shot and got killed by a man. and there was blood all over. So I don't analyze it. I just say, okay, thank you for telling me the story. And what that was, I believe, is a past life. But as long as children just tell you their stories, you don't have to believe it, you don't have to put a lot of emphasis on it. But if they start sloughing off problems, of which she did, then, you know, that's maybe what we're supposed to do, is listen to children, whatever they tell us.
Christine Alisa, our guest on the program. The book is Turning the Hourglass, Children's Passage Through Traumas and Past Lives. The website is healingthrough-alternative-therapy.com. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link onto that information and on Christine at the book and the practice that she has. If somebody is listening and their children have been diagnosed with a learning disorder and a disability, and in some cases probably maybe given medication, but they're uncomfortable with that, what should they do? What questions should be asking their therapist?
Well, I think they should be asking them, what are some other methods that could be used instead of medication? In other words, what are the techniques that the therapist has that is beneficial and will help out the child? There's many different kinds of techniques that people have or therapists have. So, and especially to maybe go to a therapist who specializes with children with attention deficit disorder or anxiety disorder. You want to go to somebody who's had some experience with children, who's really spent some time with them. And I always tell parents to interview the therapist if they're just beginning with a therapist, and have a lot of questions about, how would you deal with this? How would you deal with that? I don't want my child on medication. What would be the best thing to do? So, and then get a feel for how they feel about that therapist. If they feel good about them, then probably their child will too.
As you read the book, you get a sense that you really rely on the power of human resiliency and tenacity. And maybe we don't give these kids enough credit for being able to bounce back. That really plays an important part, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does. Children don't have as many defenses as we adults have, so they aren't so, clinging to their resistance or their
Right,
denial or
right.
whatever. They can let it go, so, but they do in this work, some children have to go to some really deep dark places, but once they do, they can let it go. I think parents and adults get sometimes afraid. I know when I work with parents, well, isn't that going to be too hard for the child, for you to put him in a place of such trauma again? And I say to them, they do have resiliency. I always make sure the child is stable enough to be able to handle this. But most children that come to me are, because I am very cautious and gentle. In other words, I don't push kids to places they can't go. But as the sessions build, they learn to trust me, they feel safe, and they feel safe about themselves. And so then they can go into this place of where they are resilient. They really are. And they can say, wow, I really went through that. In one of my chapters in the book, it's about a boy that it's called I Beat the Boogeyman. And he really said that to me at the end of our work together. He felt so kind of empowered,
Right.
that he could accomplish that.
We've got just a couple minutes left in the program. Another one of the fascinating chapters, and they all are in the book, again, told through the child's perspective with therapist notes from Christine as you're going through the book. Michael, in the title of that chapter is called "I'm Nobody's Punching Bag Anymore." Briefly, what's that story about?
Um, well, that's about a boy who tended to be a people pleaser. He wanted to please his parents. He wanted to please everybody. And the people in his family weren't perfect, like nobody is, and they had certain issues, and they would oftentimes, um, either ignore him and his needs because he never said anything, or his sister would sort of try to beat him up. And he never stuck up for himself. And I think he was what you would maybe call kind of a victim in the classroom. And in the course of the work, he was able to really feel who he was, and that he didn't have to take on everybody's stuff and fix everybody, He didn't have to worry about his father or his mother. It was a divorce situation, so it was difficult for him. He wanted to please both his parents, and they were both very different. So he got a lot of strength inside, the internal strength that was able to say to himself, I love my parents, I love my sister, but they don't have to, their worries are not my worries. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I'm not a
And
punching bag anymore.
and I'm not a punching bag. I'm not going to take it. He had a lot of anger, so it's a lot of anger work. And I'm glad you mentioned the part about that I speak from the child's point of view. Um, wrote this book specifically with child's words in mind. So when you read it, you're going into the child's world, and he's telling you what's going on inside of him, and also the things he told me in the sessions, so that I'm trying to have the reader really feel and experience what it's like for a child to go through this, and the very emotional, touching parts of it.
As you're reading the individual stories, you feel for the child almost like he's your own, and you're pulling for them to come through this. And it's so gratifying when you see somebody like in Michael's case saying, I'm not going to be a punching bag anymore. I mean, that
Right.
part of my life is over. I understand now, and I'm moving on. The book is an excellent one. It's called Turning the Hourglass: Children's Passage Through Traumas and Past Lives. Of course, available at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and available at Christine's website, healingthroughalternativetherapy.com. Christine Alisa, Alisa, has been our guest on the program. And you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and find information on Christine, her website, and the book as well. Christine, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
It's been our pleasure. You've been listening to This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.